Hi everybody, my name's Dave Whipple and you're watching Bushradical. If you've watched this channel much, you've noticed that I've done a couple different knife reviews. And I've made mention of it a few times that I'm really not a knife collector. I know guys that are knife collectors that have 20, 30, 40, 50 knives, but that's not me. I acquire knives as I find a knife that I think I'll have a use for, and I've dabbled a little bit in making knives. But as far as high-end knives, I have next to no experience. Right now I'm in the process of doing a review on this LT Wright Genesis. And this is the first knife I've ever had that's really worth a lot of money. I've only had this maybe a week, so I'm not in the position to do a review on it. But I'll get that out to you once I'm familiar with that knife. But in the meantime, let me show you the knives I actually own so you can get an idea of where I'm coming from in the world of knives. Stay tuned. Okay, this is 90% of the knives I own. Up at my place in Alaska, I've probably got another 5 or 6 knives that are knives that I use quite a bit, but they're sitting in the glove box of my blue pickup, or in the glove box of the red pickup, or in the cabin. These are the knives that I actually own and actually use. Now, one thing you're going to find out real quick is that most of the knives I have are very utilitarian. Of course, you're all familiar with my Condor Hudson Bay. This is a cut down old Hickory. I made this knife for my wife out of a old saw blade. Cut down old kitchen knife. Another cut down old kitchen knife. Another knife I made out of a saw blade. Of course, this is my Condor bush lore. You guys have seen this before. My Condor Woodlaw. Love this knife. Old Marinette, Wisconsin pocket knife, old Camelus electrician's knife, and an old Western Knife Company, kind of a Boy Scout knife. And that's basically it. Let's take just a second and take a look at each one of these knives. So for starters, here's my Condor Hudson Bay. Of course, this knife is very familiar. Anybody that's watched this channel, one of the first knives I ever reviewed was this knife. And this is my knife from Alone. You can see I burned in 49 marks on this sheath for the 49 days that Brooke and I were out there. Also, this knife has had a modified handle where I ground out a lot of area here and a lot of area here to make room for my hand. Great piece of steel. It's soft, it will ding, it will get dull fairly quick, but you're probably never going to chip it. I spent 7 straight weeks with this knife on my hip. I'm very intimately familiar with this knife, and it's done everything I've asked it to do. This little guy was made from an Ontario knife, old Hickory. The handle is micarta, but it's not micarta like you think it would be. This micarta came from a canvas resin hand float for finishing concrete. Some of you know that I'm a cement finisher by trade, and this handle was cut out of a canvas resin hand float for floating concrete. If you take a real close look and notice the rivets on this knife, they're actually 16 penny nails. There's the head of the nail. On this side is the nail peened over with a ball peen hammer. The blade on this knife is maybe 3.5 inches. The handle is about 4.5 inches. Very comfortable. Love this knife. Quick little story on this knife. This is a knife that I took to New York when we went to boot camp for Alone. The kind of Alone tryout, so to speak. This is the one I took. So this is my Condor bush lore. I've had this 6 or 8 months. This is the knife that I've wore on my belt all summer long in Alaska, all through the Alaska Cabin Project video series, where I'm building that log cabin right now on our property in Alaska. This is a knife I've carried. Great sheath, great knife, handles very ergonomic, one of the most comfortable knives I've had. Love this knife. Little cut down kitchen knife. I think this is Forgercraft, maybe. I use this knife quite a bit. Just because it lives on the bench in my garage, I always got a knife that I can grab, do what I need to do, and just set it back down. This is the very first knife I ever made. This is out of an old cross-cut saw blade. I tried to keep the blade cool as I ground it out, and I cut it out with a angle grinder with a cut-off wheel. The handle is just a shoelace. You know, it's pretty crude, but it holds an edge. It gets sharp. It was a fun project. This knife technically isn't mine. This belongs to Brooke. Micarta handles from that same hand float. It's got 1/8 inch brass pins in it. This came from a saw blade too, but when I cut out the shape of this knife, I threw the blank into the wood stove and let it anneal. You know, I let it lose all of its temper. And then I got it hot in the wood stove in the garage with the draft wide open, quenched it in some used motor oil, and then I baked it in the oven to try to heat treat it. I really don't know what I'm doing, and you know, I think it's probably a little brittle. It's extremely hard, so I don't think it's softened up enough in the heat treating process. Good news is when you put an edge on it, it keeps an edge a long time, but I'm afraid if you drop this knife, you'd probably break it because I think it's too brittle still. But I made this for Brooke for Christmas. She never uses it, so I kind of think she doesn't like it that much. But oh, this is my Condor Woodlaw. This case is homemade. I actually made it out of a briefcase. Now I bought this knife as a blank. I bought 2 of these. I made one into a knife for Brooke and I made one into a knife for myself. Once again, the pins I used to hold this handle on are 16 penny nails. One side is countersunk, so the nail head is flush with the surface. On the other side, I just peened the nail, the cut off nail, over with a ball peen hammer, and that actually makes really serviceable knife pins. And everybody's got a few 16 penny nails just hanging out. Now, I probably wore this knife as much as I've wore any knife. Very comfortable, very ergonomic, extremely simple. So I love the simplicity of this knife. I love the utility of it, the size, the shape, everything about this knife makes me happy. Great little knife. Another old hickory that's been cut down. You've probably noticed by now that I like a knife that's got a longer handle than the blade. I got a real big hand and I like a really long handle that I don't feel like I'm struggling against. And the handle on this knife it's plenty big, and the blade is maybe 3 3/4 inches. The handle's probably 4 1/2. This is an old hickory. I actually got this at an estate sale, and it's pretty much a true 1/8 of an inch, and the new ones aren't quite that thick. It's a wonderful knife. It has it's done everything I've wanted it to do. Hard to go wrong with just a good old American carbon steel knife. Very simple, very utilitarian, delivers the goods. It's just a nice little knife. Of course, we have a couple extra pocket knives here too. You've seen a video, I did a video where I restored this knife. Picked this up at a junk store, antique store, for $4. It's very, very old knife, good steel, good condition. Of course, this guy is a Western knife company, kind of a Boy Scout knife. Fantastic condition. This knife is, I've seen these knives on eBay go for over $100. It's a very good quality old knife, and I found it next to new condition, and I paid $5 for this at a flea market. I do love this knife. I don't generally carry it much, and the problem is this kind of digs into the side of your leg when you're carrying one of these knives that has this little loop. So I do carry this knife once in a while. I don't carry it as much as I carry this one. This is the Camelus electrician's knife. Unlike other electrician's knives, I actually took the screwdriver blade to my wet grinder and I turned it into a knife blade. Because honestly, I never used the screwdriver on this thing, and I could have used another blade. So this is a very, very thick blade. Goes down to a nice sharp point. It's got a good edge on it, and it has the locking blade. So this is the one that locks. The other one does not lock. Very sharp. Again, I do carry this one, but I wish it didn't have the loop. Like I said before, I think I have maybe a few extra knives in Alaska that I don't have here with me at the moment in Michigan. But I wanted to do this video more for context than anything. When I do knife reviews and when I talk about knives, I want you guys to know where I'm coming from. As you can see, almost every knife that I've got is a value knife. It's either homemade, or it's an old carbon steel American knife that's been modified, or it's a value knife like a Condor that's also a carbon steel, nothing fancy about it, but a good, solid, usable, utilitarian knife. That's kind of what I gravitate towards, and that's, obviously you can see those are the kind of knives that I actually own, carry, and use. I wanted to just do this video real quick, so when we do talk about knives, when I do knife reviews, you kind of have an idea where I'm coming from. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me and going through a big pile of knives. Thanks for watching Bushradical. But be radical, eh? See you soon.